Right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's Cabinet. I would like to welcome members of the Cabinet, officers and members of the public viewing on YouTube to this virtual meeting of the Cabinet. I am Councillor Dina Romero and I am the Council Leader of Bath and North East Somerset Council. I will now call out the names of the other participants for this meeting to introduce themselves. This will also give us all an opportunity to check that they can hear and be heard. So, Councillor Richard Samuel.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Councillor Richard Samuel, Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Resources.
Paul Crosley.
Good evening. I'm Cabinet Member for Communities, Heritage and a range of other services the Council provides. And tonight I'm leading the papers on Mead Lane moorings and the Leisure Services Review.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Sarah Warren.
Hi, I'm Cabinet Member for Climate Emergency.
Councillor Tim Ball.
Hello, I'm Councillor Tim Ball. I'm Cabinet Member for Housing, Planning and Economic Development.
Councillor Dave Wood.
Good evening, Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood Services.
Councillor Joanna Wright.
Good evening, I am Cabinet Member for Transport Services jointly with Neil Butters.
Thank you. Councillor Rob Appleyard.
Yeah, good evening. My name's Councillor Rob Appleyard. I'm the Cabinet Member for Adult Services, Safeguarding and Public Health.
Thank you, Rob. Councillor Kevin Guy.
Good evening, everyone. I'm the Cabinet Member for Children and Young People.
And Councillor Neil Butters.
Good evening, Councillor Neil Butters, Joint Cabinet Member for Transport Services, along with Joe Wright.
Thank you. Also present are Will Godfrey.
Hi, good evening.
Who is the Chief Executive of the Council, Michael Hewitt, who is our Legal Services Manager.
Hello.
And finally, Jack Lakovich, who is the Senior Democratic Services Officer.
Good evening.
So the Council has agreed a protocol to cover virtual meetings, and this meeting will operate in line with that protocol. It's in accordance with Coronavirus Regulations 2020. The meeting has the same status and validity as a meeting held in the Guildhall. Can I remind members, officers and speakers to keep background noise to a minimum, to only speak one person at a time and not to speak over others. Please mute your microphones when not speaking and then unmute when I invite you to speak. Please will you indicate if you wish to speak using the raise hand function in Zoom. Councillor Richard Samuel will take over the chairing of the meeting if I have to leave the meeting or if I lose my connection. And just for everybody else's information, there may be times when the screens might go blank. That is because on most devices it's very difficult to read your papers, your cabinet papers, as well as use the Zoom function. So it's just that when people are looking at the papers, if they haven't got another device running at the same time, then their screen may go blank, but they are still taking part in the meeting. So if Cabinet is required to take a vote, I will read out each member's name in alphabetical order. Each member should then state clearly if they are for or against the motion. And this will enable the Senior Democratic Services Officer to accurately record the vote, and it will also ensure that decision making is clear to the public who are viewing on YouTube. So before we move on, do I have any questions? Thank you. Right, second item on the agenda are apologies for absence. I believe everyone is here, so I do not believe there are any absences to note. Is that correct, Jack?
That is correct, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Are there any? Have any been advised to you, Jack?
I have received none, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Urgent business agreed by the chair. There is none. And next we move on to questions from public and councillors. So there were 15 questions from councillors. Each councillor may ask a maximum of 2 supplementary questions. So I will now go through the questions and ask if there's a supplementary question for each. I won't read the whole question, nor will I read the whole answer, but I will just go through the number of the question and who asked it of whom. So the first question is from Councillor Hardman, and that is to Councillor Guy. Is there a supplementary question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes,
yes, there is a supplementary question. Firstly, Kevin, I very much welcome your positive response to my actual question, but my supplementary is, would you, as the Cabinet member, agree to monitor the effect of the actions proposed for our care leavers so that we can see whether more care leavers are able to take up opportunities within the council? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hardman, for your supplementary question. I have the official response, which is the lead member for Children and Young People welcomes the focus on access to support for care leavers and is very happy to work with council officers to progress the local authorities' proposals as set out in the response to question 5. So that's my official response. My unofficial response is yes, of course, would love to, and more than happy to discuss this after the meeting or another time. And I'd also like to see how we can get the scrutiny board involved as well. So thank you very much for that question, Councillor Hardman.
Thank you. Thanks.
So as you know, Councillor Hardman, you do have 2 supplementary questions that you could ask. I assume that you are satisfied and you don't wish to use your second bite of the cherry, as it were.
No, I am quite satisfied, so thank you.
So the second question is from Councillor Player, and I don't believe Councillor Player is here, so I don't believe that there will be a supplementary.
No supplementary.
Thank you. The third question is from Councillor Blackburn to Councillor Ball. Is Councillor Blackburn here?
There's no supplementary from Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you. Councillor Pritchard to Councillor Wood. Is there a supplementary?
No supplementary.
Councillor Pritchard to Councillor Guy. So
No.
supplementary. Councillor Pritchard to Councillor Wood.
No supplementary.
Councillor Pritchard to Councillors Wright and Butters.
No supplementary. But that question is, will be answered within 5 clear.
Yes, thank you. Councillor May to Councillor Samuel.
No supplementary.
Councillor May to myself. No supplementary.
No supplementary.
Councillor May to Councillor Ball.
No supplementary.
Councillor May to Councillor Samuel.
No supplementary.
Councillor Warrington to Councillor Ball.
No supplementary.
Councillor Warrington to Councillor Ball.
No supplementary.
Councillor Warrington to myself.
No supplementary.
Councillor Player to Councillor Ball.
No supplementary.
Thank you. I believe that's the last of the questions from councillors. So these will obviously form part of the record that will be available on our publicly accessible website. Thank you. I've not been notified that there were any questions from the public.
That is correct, Madam Chairman. There were no questions from the public.
Thank you. And the next item, item 6, is for statements, deputations, or petitions from the public and councillors. There are 14 registered speakers for this meeting, and I will be taking this item just before item 11 on the agenda in order to keep the fluency of the meeting. So the next item, item 7, is the minutes of the 22nd of July 2020. Can I have confirmation that this is an accurate record of that meeting? Thank you, Councillor Appleyard. And can I have somebody just to second that? I'll take Councillor Guy. If everybody on this one, I assume that we can just put our hands up. Jack, we don't need to go through it alphabetically. Okay, everybody in favour, please just raise your hands.
All for, Madam Chairman.
Thank you for the confirmation. Okay, moving on, item 8 is single member items now requisitioned to Cabinet. There are none. Next is matters referred by policy, development and scrutiny bodies. I do not have anything that has been referred to this meeting. Item 10 is the recent single member decisions. This we would normally just note, but I have been informed that Councillor Samuel would like to just make a small comment.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I made a decision in relation to the Saltford Tennis Club, and I just wanted to highlight that as something which I think hopefully will be of major benefit to residents in Saltford. I know that it's a well-established club and very popular in the area, so hopefully this decision will benefit local people and you know, they will get enjoyment from the arrangements we've agreed to enter into. So I just wanted to highlight that, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Samuel. So this item we are just asked to note. So can I just have everyone, if you are happy to note, to indicate that you are. Okay. Is that clear, Jack?
Yes, that's fine, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, now we move on to the statements from members of the public. As I said, there are 14 registered speakers for this meeting. I believe you have all received guidance for speaking at virtual meetings, and you will have 3 minutes to address the Cabinet. You will get a 30-second warning to bring your statement to an end. And then once you've finished your statement, members of the Cabinet may ask you factual questions. And after that, you will then leave the meeting and you are obviously invited to watch the remainder of the meeting on Baines's Council's YouTube channel. So I'd now like to invite the first of the speakers. These are non-agenda related items. So first, I would like to invite David Bredgewell to make his statement.
Thank you, Dina. I'd like to raise again issues of transport security and COVID-19 and raise a few points, and then one issue on the clean air zone. On the COVID-19 issues, I can't reiterate enough how important it is to keep the bus stations, bus infrastructure clean in the city, especially as COVID can lie on that infrastructure for 72 hours if it's staying still. But it's extremely important there's more cleaning goes on the infrastructure in the city and obviously in North East Somerset. The second issue I really want to bring to your attention is COVID marshals. What we've watched recently, a number of the university buses and some of the behaviour on the late evening ones. I know there's a lockdown at 10, but they don't all go out to university at 10 o'clock, I can assure you of that. Some of the students tend not to wear masks. Others sometimes can be cheeky to drivers. And unless even the Somerset Police or the British Transport Police are around the bus station, rail station area, then sometimes it seems to be not the kind of atmosphere you'd really want in the city centre. I wonder, the government's announced today, and the police minister was in Gloucester, whether or not you're going to follow South Gloucestershire Council and bring in COVID and social distancing marshals. There is extra money to the Police and Crime Commissioner's office and to the council. South Gloucester has also brought theirs in this weekend. They will start this weekend in the South Gloucester area. And I think Bristol's looking at the issue, I was told tonight as well. But there is money from Sue Mount Stevens to look at with that. On the other issue, I'm extremely concerned about the West of England Combined Authority business plan, recovery plan and green plan, which is going tomorrow from the board and the Metro Mayor. I read, I word searched five words on public transport. Bus, I only got Metro Bus once. I got the light rail scheme, which we welcomed across the city region in Bristol and Bath. I got a little bit about having a bus and public transport panel and some questions about park and ride. I've compared that now with the Mayor of the West Midlands, Andy Street, and the plan he's put into government, and the plan that now Steve Rotherham's put in from the Liverpool City region, and the one that's gone in from Andy Burnham. And we've got an awful lot more work to do there to make sure that Neil and Joanna's looking at this to make sure that we have access about public transport and the investment programmes we wish to see from the Treasury. So I'm extremely concerned for tomorrow that that is not picked up. I wouldn't sign that document off, but I'm not a politician. But if you're in a competitive situation with the West Midlands. Okay. And the final point I want to raise is a point to make sure that we pick up the issue of coaches, National Express and rail replacement, which have to go in the city centre, and charging them £100 for every journey is going to go into simple pastures. Tourist coaches can only use the park and ride sites. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Councillor Butters, did you have any questions you wanted to raise with David?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, David, for your usual comprehensive note to major meetings. As you know, we've been looking particularly at the cleaning regime at the bus station. I gather that First have initiated a more comprehensive regime now, covering windows as well as floors and other surfaces. And there was also a special deep clean 3 weeks ago. And I was wondering if you could confirm whether you think there has now been a difference. Thank you.
I think I can just say thank you to yourself and Joanna. I think they have taken the issue very seriously in First Group. Of course, it's the issue about making sure that the surrounding bits of the lease, which are in the hands of the development company owns the shopping centre and Network Rail, that we continue to have a master plan that cleans the whole of the bus station area. But yeah, there has certainly been some improvement. But I think the issue is for Paul Crossley to make sure that there may be in yourselves that there's a master plan for cleaning that continues even when hopefully there's a vaccine for COVID-19. And I do ask you to look at the issue of National Express, because they raised that tonight with me following the television about the issue of them using the coach station with Euro 6 engines and the rail replacement services.
Thank you, David. Are there any other questions for David? Well, thank you very much, as ever, David, for your, as Neil said, your very comprehensive statement, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
So the next speaker is Simon Banks.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to read my statement, if I may, if everybody can hear me. And this is in relation to the ecological emergency. The authority's declaration of an ecological emergency is a welcome and much needed response to the rapidly deteriorating state of our environment at both local and national level. It is exactly in step with the mood of the nation and especially our young people. Emergencies require urgent and decisive action, and that is now the task before us. Our response to this emergency will define us in the eyes of our children and our children's children. Why did they wait? What were they thinking? How could they let this happen? These are the questions we don't want to be asked in the future. And yet we know there are many immediate challenges to our needed actions. How do we create healthy, affordable housing? How do we care for the least fortunate? How do we rebuff outside pressures from vested interests and political centralisation? And of course, how do we react to the prospect of the successive and enduring pandemics and climate change events, that we will be facing for the foreseeable future. The plans of even 1 year ago now seem to be a distant wish list. We have yet to see the full economic impact. All we know is that it will be a burden for generations and will provide even greater challenges than we have faced so far. So our response must be rounded. We must find ways of monetizing our assets in a sustainable way, leveraging our universities to create local new employment, create the conditions to house all our citizens according to their means, imagine and deliver new transportation systems, and above all, make the city a healthy and enjoyable place to live. In summary, we need a new vision, the kind that drove our reconstruction after the Second World War, for in its own way, we are at war now. It will not be easy. It will need brave decisions from you, pain for some, patience with the frustrated, and robust defense against the naysayers. I have suggested to the leader that now would be the right time to pause, call a moratorium on urban green space development, and use that time to formulate a new vision, drawing on local expertise and engagement. You have talented and imaginative people in your officers and advisors. Challenge them to come up with new ideas and free them to take the actions we need to deliver your vision.
30 seconds left.
Get it right, and we can lead the way for everyone. Get it wrong, and our children will be asking, how could they let this happen? Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. And thank you also, not just for your statement, for the challenge that you set us. Are there any questions from Cabinet? Thank you. So Simon, you, if I invite you to leave now, then you can watch the rest of the meeting on YouTube.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'd next like to call Danny Groves. So Danny, if you would like to unmute.
Hello. Thank you very much. I too will read a statement if you can hear me. I too would like to start by asking a couple of questions. The first of which is, when you need expert advice on matters concerning your health, do you consult a doctor or a planning officer? Equally, when you need expert advice on matters of ecology, do you consult your own ecology expert or a planning officer? The reason I ask is that the development on the Tufa field at the rear of English Combe Lane has been passed despite the council's own ecology expert objecting to the development. The field contains rare, I repeat rare, calcium depositing tufa flushes and associated fauna and flora, which cannot be replaced or replicated elsewhere. This is one of the reasons the council cleverly declared this land as an SNCI, a site of nature conservation interest. The objections to this development from your own ecology expert are very clear, and I quote, "The proposal remains likely to result in substantial harm to a site of scientific nature conservation interest and will include permanent loss of habitats." She also said there remains a high risk of net loss to tufa flush habitat. Residents, nearly 80 of whom in just over the last 24 hours have signed an open letter to the council leader, are extremely confused and angered by the way the council has overruled this expert advice. The planning permission was granted with a significant number of offsetting requirements around creating new habitats at a larger site, but your own expert ecologist's latest objection is damning and clear as regards this offsetting. There is no guarantee that these plans on paper will have any chance of working in reality. Therefore, she states, "I would not support this site being a trial case for such measures." I'm not quite sure what part of this objection we're not really understanding or getting through. So I repeat my earlier question. If you want to get expert advice on the damage a development will cause to ecology on a site, do you ask your expert ecologist or your planning officer? The timeline on this episode is thus: council buys land with ecologically important rare features on it. Council declares the area as of scientific importance. Council then brilliantly unanimously declares an ecological emergency for Bath in the summer. Unfortunately, council planning then decides to override its own experts and destroy the ecology on this site to build houses.
30 seconds left.
Only 8 units of which are for social housing. This is not a good look, and the council's credibility reference ecology is crumbling. What residents want is for a council leader to call a halt to proceedings and the council to reflect and consult on this bizarre situation. Be a standout force for good here. Don't commit an ecological crime. Destruction of ecology, important features and areas is to destroy ourselves. If a satisfactory outcome through dialogue with residents is not achieved, then residents would be obliged to examine other options. Please, please pause, think about this, review. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Do I have any questions for the case? Then I thank you for your statement, and I know you referenced an open letter, and obviously I will respond to that as soon as I can. Okay. Thank you. I'd like to call Frank Kenny now to speak.
Hello, I'm Frank. I've asked to talk on ecological and climate emergencies. We're in ecological and climate crises now, and they are on our doorstep. The catalogue of declining populations of species is well known and accelerating at a frightening pace. We're under threat of losing our wildlife in the UK. It's that serious. Thankfully, Baines Council has made a commitment towards reversing these crises, not to make them worse. That means leaving green spaces alone in order to provide refuge for extremely beleaguered wildlife and ecology that's being decimated in our country. That is why when you go to these green spaces, often there are a very large variety of wildlife. It's because they have nowhere else to go. We must not rush decisions through that produce grave errors of misjudgment and bad mistakes. I refer to the planning application for the project to build 37 residences on the field behind 89 to 123 English Combe Lane. This field is just what I've described, a green space, an oasis, and a refuge for many species of wildlife, ordinary and not so ordinary. The rush to get on with it has caused the developers, Aqueous, a council-owned company, to potentially break the law and cause the field to become a crime scene. This proposal should never have been made in the first place. Historically, other proposals have been made and withdrawn for many of the very same reasons that we, the residents, have been objecting about. Many objections against this proposal to build, quite frankly, lackluster and underwhelming properties on the field behind English Combe Lane are recorded elsewhere and includes objections about the destruction of the field's ecology and the adverse effect on the surrounding environment. Building on the field will result in the loss of the Tufa Flush, the destruction of natural oasis for a wide variety of species, and a place with exceptional qualities will be lost forever and add to the crises. The poor quality of the proposed development and the destruction of the ecology is the responsibility of the landowner, the planning permission applicant, the body who has granted the planning permission, and also the developer throughout this process. The effect of the ecology of this proposal makes it totally unacceptable. The residents have been despairing, dismayed, and are now angry with Baines Council. The Baines Council's own ecology advisor objected and condemned this proposal not once, but twice. Since the council with its developer, still the council with its developer company decided to push the proposal through the planning application process, even with the condemnation of its own ecological reports and commitments to reverse both climate and ecological emergencies. I started by saying that thankfully Baines has made a commitment towards reversing these emergencies. This commitment should have focused your minds and make you think twice about making ill thought out decisions as this one on the field behind English Combe Lane. This decision has left us dumbfounded, saddened, and angry. The residents take your commitment on their behalf very seriously and will not let derogation of your duty in relation to especially the ecology and climate pass unchallenged. I cite the example of the park and ride at the Meadows, where the then leader of the council changed that planning permission and so stopped the park and ride scheme from going ahead. I'm sure that took courage. Look at your commitment to make a difference in reversing the ecological and climate crises. Look at the flaws in this proposal. Think again. Take courage and please stop this development before it goes ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. So are there any questions for Frank?
Chairman, just a question of accuracy. I do not recall a planning application for Bathampton Meadows. What I do recall was a fundamental objection to the scheme from the Highways Agency, and the council then withdrew that scheme on land that it owned. But don't recall that it had got as far as planning applications or consent. I may be wrong.
Well, we'll check that, and obviously come back to you, Frank, if that is incorrect. But thank you for your statement, and please watch the rest of the meeting on the YouTube channel.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we move on to speakers who are speaking about speaking to item 11, which is around the Mead Lane moorings. So I'd like to invite first Councillor Duncan Hounsell to make his statement.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Duncan Hounsell, Saltford Ward Councillor, and I'm also speaking on behalf of my ward colleague, Councillor Alistair Singleton. Mead Lane, Saltford is a beautiful and iconic location. The river has been used for transport and recreation for many years. The riverbank is a public space and, in the interest of equality, needs to be available to all sections of the public and not any one interest group. Following concern that the 2005 stabilisation works never envisaged moorings, the decision in January to have a temporary ban on moorings until the stability of the bank could be assessed was the right one for public safety. We would like to thank all the boaters who adhered to the restriction during this period. The Atkins report is clear that the riverbank is apparently stable, but recommends periodic reviews. Decisions can now be made about the future use of this short stretch. We've seen a wide range of uses of the riverbank this summer by members of the public: paddleboarding, fishing, wild swimming, sailing, and picnicking. The otters have returned. We've also seen a revival in many wildlife, flora and fauna. The plants on the riverbank and adjacent shallow water supports a whole set of special invertebrates which suffer from unrestrained mooring. The package of recommendations before you strikes a fair balance between the wishes of the boating community and other groups and individuals. The riverbank to all the residents of Saltford is like its village green. The reallocation of the 48-hour mooring section as open space for other leisure purposes is welcomed and may be the first step to establishing a nature reserve on the riverbank. Moorings can be prevented in this open section with simple buoyage, a floating line and clear signage. A ban on all moorings for 4 months over the winter period is sensible in the interest of safety. A criticism of the previous Conservative administration was that a mooring trial was introduced with no funding allocated for monitoring and control. The creation of a joint river warden post with the Canal and River Trust is excellent news. This will help boaters to fulfil their Canal and River Trust continuous cruising licensing conditions, ensure action is taken in relation to overstays, and be a point of engagement for all parties. A My Permit type charging regime could also help with boat identification and deter overstays. We welcome the recommendation in the Atkins report that the temporary parking restriction is made permanent. Mead Lane has no pavements and a parking ban allows for pedestrian safety, social distancing and removes congestion. The Wessex Water Scientific Centre at the end of Mead Lane is open 7 days a week for delivery of drinking water samples and wastewater effluent samples from a variety of sources, including reservoirs. The centre also requires the delivery of essential supplies. It's vital for public health that access and egress is not impeded by parked vehicles. The long-term aspiration is to reallocate moorings away from Mead Lane. Key to that is the ongoing work identifying alternative sites, positive engagement with the boating community and full public consultation. Some have described the complex issues around Mead Lane in terms of a clash between cultures. This is and always has been nonsense. Saltford is a kind, welcoming and liberal-minded community. The recommendations before you represent the hallmarks of a Liberal Democrat council administration. evidence-based and transparent decision-making, fairness, concern about equality and fulfilling the public sector equality duty, concern about ecology and environment, and improving people's lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hounsell. May I ask if Cabinet has any questions for the councillor? Thank you. So we will obviously take your statement into account when we discuss this item, which is the next item. So please feel free to watch on YouTube. The next speaker is Elizabeth Evans. Good evening, Elizabeth. Would you, thank you, you need to unmute this. No.
Yeah, okay. I am the Neighbourhood Watch Coordinator for Avon Lane and Mead Lane. On behalf of the Mead Lane residents and the wider community, I would like to thank the Council for their endeavours and for the opportunity to speak this evening. The river is about everything that takes place on it and in it. And despite upsetting comments made to us by a few, all we have ever tried to do is to protect this area for the greater community to enjoy and keep safe access to homes and businesses. All this is of paramount importance, and to that end, we see the termination of moorings here as imperative. Coronavirus and the mooring suspensions saw nature take back control. Reeds that had previously been trodden or beaten down flourished. A reed warbler, a family of otters, swans and ducks returning, all good environmental signs. Many boats generate electricity by running their engines. Here they're moored just below our homes, sending carcinogenic fumes into them from their diesel engines, often exacerbated when they double, triple, or even quadruple more. I understand that unlike road vehicles, there are no checks on emissions from boat engines or generators. These are sometimes placed on the riverbank, all of this just 8 metres from our homes. The Atkins report, the structural survey of the riverbank, did not, as we were led to expect, fully examine the rock armour under the waterline, only looking from the edge of murky waters. I can only reiterate that the 2005 riverbank reinforcement was not constructed for the mooring of boats. The Highways Inspection report, quite comprehensive, however, it did not cover the numerous repairs made by utility companies. In recent years alone, there have been at least 2 gas main repairs. No survey has been carried out on the whole carriageway. What issues could lie there? The Cabinet recommendations, the long-term aspiration to reallocate moorings from Mead Lane. We would not like this to run on indefinitely and would appreciate a swift conclusion. Ensure that suitable alternative moorings are identified in place prior to reducing any further moorings at Mead Lane. What progress has been made? It's been 9 months since this was agreed. To remove the 48-hour moorings at Mead Lane from the 1st of November 2020 on a permanent basis. The otter haul-out should also be included. Despite the no mooring signage, boats frequently moor across it. A positive step, removing moorings from November to February. It is foolhardy to moor here when the river is in flood, as is the case this week. The summer brought lower water levels, stranding boats on the rock armour, symptoms of global warming, and proving this area is not safe or suitable. The previous administration was negligent when setting up the mooring trial. They neither consulted nor followed their own guidelines and used financial restraints for lack of controls. We tried for 4 years to obtain controls, endeavouring to, despite what others say, protect the wildlife and enable greater public access. We would not be where we are today if they had done this. A minority of boaters, and I stress it's a minority, have abused mooring timescales, used the riverbank as a dumping ground, and in some cases threatened local people, and with their nose-to-tail mooring prevented access to others. Whatever the outcome of tonight's meeting, we cannot go back to that uncontrolled position. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Do I have any questions to ask of the speaker? Well, thank you for your statement, and that will be taken into account when we discuss this item. So please feel free to watch the rest of the meeting on YouTube.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd next like to call Phil Harding.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I've Vice Chair of Saltford Parish Council and Chair of Planning. Our Saltford Parish Council recognises the work undertaken by Baines Council to take forward the commissioning of the structural survey during the many challenges posed by COVID-19. The survey has made some inaccurate observations, but more importantly, we are concerned that it lacks a full condition survey of the rock armour below the water level. The mooring of boats, including narrowboats, will damage and reduce the lifespan of a rock armour stabilisation scheme designed and installed at a 45-degree angle. The report states that rock armour was not visible along several stretches of the riverbank, yet describes it as being intact. Without a full inspection down to and including the toe of the scheme, that is not a safe assumption. However, we are largely supportive of the recommendations by officers and hope the Cabinet will agree and take them forward promptly, but with just a few important changes to ensure successful implementation. Firstly, a longer-term aspiration to remove moorings in Mead Lane is too vague, open-ended, and is unacceptable to our local community. Allowing this contentious issue to drag on any longer than necessary without an end date would cause further stress to residents, to boaters, and risk critical damage to the rock armour, risking the infrastructure it protects. We note the aim to find suitable alternative moorings before removing the Mead Lane 14-day moorings, but remind the Cabinet that before 2015, only rarely did boats moor in Mead Lane. Those were short-term visitor moorings. Also now, as then, liveaboard boats moor elsewhere in winter. We therefore ask that Cabinet agrees today to end the 14-day moorings in Mead Lane by no later than 31st of October of next year, sooner if moorings elsewhere come forward. If finding alternative 14-day moorings along the River Avon proves unsuccessful by next October, despite the considerable length of riverbank owned by Baines, then a mix of other solutions may be appropriate. For example, lengthen to 14 days some of the shorter mooring limits elsewhere, and or Baines could rent mooring spaces where fees are charged and make those moorings available at a subsidised rate for lower income boaters until new suitable moorings become available or are created. We strongly welcome the creation of a joint river warden post with CRT. We ask that this post is filled soon, preferably starting this autumn to help implement the changes in Mead Lane. The lack of management and enforcement has been a major problem during and since the mooring trial when 14-day moorings commenced. The 14-day moorings should therefore only be restarted from March to October next year if the proposed river warden is in post.
Heard the seconds warning.
We look forward to working constructively with the new river warden and with the Baines officer responsible for protecting the Mead Lane riverbank. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Phil. So do I have any questions to ask of the speaker? No? So thank you, Phil, for your statement. We will obviously take that into account when we're discussing this item. So if you'd like to leave, and then please watch the rest of the meeting on the YouTube. Thank you. Right, so next speaker I have is Rebecca Saul. Rebecca.
Hello, can you see me?
Yeah. Yes, we can see and we can hear you.
I'm Rebecca and I've been a boater for 9 years. In 2016, Baines Water Space Study highlighted a lack of river moorings and facilities for the boater community and suggested more moorings were provided. The mooring trial in 2017 found an 85% compliance of boaters to the 2-week rule. In 2019, the police officer present at the community trigger meeting I attended advised the council to instruct the residents to modify their behaviour and that they should not be continually approaching boaters and documenting their behaviour. These actions constitute as harassment and violate data protection laws. Later in 2019, the council spent thousands of pounds on an in-depth independent consultation with all the stakeholders by Lemon Gazelle. The consultation found that overall there was support for the community to retain mooring at Mead Lane and that this was an inappropriate location for a nature reserve as it's next to a road. The complaints then changed to be concerns about the stability of the bank. This cabinet said in January that they had all visited Mead Lane and spoken to the residents, yet not a single councillor spoke to a single voter. This cabinet decided to take all of the claims at face value with zero data to back them up and decided to suspend mooring at Mead Lane. My solicitor challenged this decision and the process of coming to it, and was told by your legal department that once Baines has received the engineer's report, there will be further consultation with interested parties before the matter is brought back to the cabinet for a decision. And here we find ourselves at said cabinet meeting, and you still have not spoken to us. Then the Atkins report said there was no indication that boats were adversely affecting the bank. The council have spent tens of thousands of pounds on reports and surveys and reviews that all say the moorings should remain. It is only the residents' view that is affected by these decisions. For hundreds of boaters, it is the safety and security of our homes. I have not chosen this fight. I am just consistently forced to defend my lifestyle. The Waterways Act and my licence make this a perfectly legitimate lifestyle. I do not want to have to defend my right to exist every time a new cabinet member is elected. Unlike other travellers, boaters are not yet a protected characteristic, but we experience the same disadvantages as other travellers, like access to healthcare and education being limited. And we are much more likely to be victims of crime and prejudice, which we have been here. The council doesn't have any evidence for claims made against boaters, and reams of studies and data to say this mooring should be retained. The council must listen to the firm evidence they have before them and seek to understand the lives of those that their decision will affect, as removing the moorings will lead to legal action.
Thank you, Rebecca.
And if there's more time, that anyone who knows the river knows there's no alternative sites. And if anyone wanted to come with me on my boat and travel down the river and investigate other sites, then you would see there are no viable sites. And we see otters all the time and they play on our boats.
Thank you, Rebecca. Do I have any questions or comment from Cabinet to Rebecca? Thank you. Obviously, we will definitely take your statement into account when we are discussing this item. And if you would like to, please watch the rest of the meeting on YouTube.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to invite Avril McGovern to speak to Cabinet.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm just looking to see if I can see you as well.
Great, thank you.
Welcome to the meeting, Avril.
Thank you. Panic, shock, worry about my financial future, and fear of losing my first home. These were some of the things going through my mind when I found my boat grounded during the Triton disaster. But this changed to anger, frustration, and disbelief in the days and now weeks that have followed, when a multi-agency response to this disaster has failed to meet the welfare and safety needs of a vulnerable community with any sense of urgency. Councillors, I am unapologetic in my tone considering the recent events. I vacated Mead Lane on the 2nd of September in order to make way for the structural survey, and Triton was the next available so-called safe space to moor. The lack of accountability when it came to this multi-agency approach was self-evident, such that a formal review will now take place. The Triton incident highlights the impact on my community when that lack of authority is felt. The parallel that can be drawn to Mead Lane: it is a long, drawn-out, lackluster response involving a great many agencies, with conflicting communications being circulated. This is escalating tensions between communities and having a devastating impact on boaters' lives. You need to take a lead. An example: During the recent COVID-19 lockdown, it was stated that Bath Council was doing everything in its power to protect housing provision for the boating community at Mead Lane. But despite my pleas to Baines officers for information to be more straightforward for boaters, it said on the Baines website, the council has not reopened Mead Lane moorings and boats are requested not to moor there until further notice. This same site encouraged locals to officially report people overstaying at that time. I was shouted at by a local resident insisting incorrectly that I was breaking the law during the pandemic. Further to that, I have a police email dated July 21st stating that after taking advice from Duncan Hounsell, the police were informing boaters that Mead Lane mooring was banned, and it suggested that this information superseded any guidance to the contrary, despite the legislation still being in force. This sort of miscommunication is indicative of the poor treatment of a marginalised community who historically struggle to engage with systems and processes. Yet, when we have the impetus to do so, we are not listened to. Further examples include the underreporting of harassment at Mead Lane to the police, as I can qualify that we have been declined the right to make police reports despite that being the correct and advised action. And now, what appears to be very little correlation between the recommendations in front of you and the recommendations in the Commissioned report. Cabinet, I only have 3 minutes, and this is only the tip of the iceberg. As has been said, I am aware that in the 2 weeks prior to the January meeting, Cabinet members went to visit all of the residents of Mead Lane in order to hear their views. But at no point has anyone offered us that opportunity or engaged with the boating community in order to get a richer understanding of our lives. To date, the only consultation we have had was through the Lemon Gazelle report and the community trigger, which was weighted equally with local residents. I do not get the luxury of speaking to a local ward or parish councillor because I am a travelling boater. We have so much to do to educate you about our way of life and the impact that your decision will have on our future. Unfortunately, it takes an incident like Twerton to bring this to the fore. Councillors, do not let there be another disaster. Vote today to retain Mead Lane moorings and draw a line under this.
Thank you, Avril.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for Avril? Thank you. And I know that the points that you raise around the enforcement, indeed the waiving of enforcement during the pandemic, and also following the Twerton Gate incident, will be picked up during the discussion. So thank you very much for your statement, Avril, and please watch the rest of the meeting on YouTube.
Thank you very much.
Call Ross Fender, please.
Hi, good evening. Can I just check that you can hear and see me?
Absolutely, both.
Okay, I too am going to be reading my statement. My name is Ross Fender. I'm a home-owning, tax-paying, boat-owning, mechanical engineer and CEO of my own company. I would like to thank the Council for undertaking the production of the Atkins report. And as Councillor Crossley put it, I'm particularly pleased with the comprehensive structural report, which is clear in its findings, as are the recommendations before us. Now, on January the 16th, 2020, the Council minuted and stated in point 2.2, officers are to report back to Cabinet once the results of the structural survey are known to enable the Cabinet to make an informed decision on the long-term use of this land. So you guys agreed in January that the decisions you make must be based on factual information from this report. So let's look at the factual information in the report. It can't really be any clearer. In the short term, do nothing. In the medium term, enforce laws regarding engine and generator usage, restrict draft of boats, and improve mooring provision. As I understand, the first two recommendations regarding engines and drafts are very self-explanatory and fairly obvious. So what does improving mooring provision really mean? Well, I could talk over the report and I could pick it apart, but the key and the only important word here is improve. A recommendation to improve something doesn't mean remove it. If someone parks inconsiderately in your road, the solution isn't to remove all the parking or suddenly to put parking meters up and charge people. That doesn't stop an inconsiderate. Removing something doesn't improve it. We know a colossal amount of money was set aside for the Mead Lane report. And in that report, it also indicates 8 possible future locations. The structural bank survey and reports alone for these locations would cost huge sums of money based on the current run rate of spend on previous comprehensive reports that have happened. It would be crazy to spend vast amounts of money again investigating when the homework has already been done for a safe mooring location. You cannot expect people to moor on land that hasn't been scrutinised for bank safety and integrity to the same extent and effort that you put into the Mead Lane survey. And as a taxpayer, I'd be incredibly disappointed if more money was wasted on needless surveys and reports. And as a boat owner and as someone that lives aboard, I'll be even more disappointed if science and facts are ignored, which leaves only one real option. Listen to the science, reason with fact, which is the obvious.
30 seconds.
Let me finish. Duncan Hounslow was quoted saying, "I'm pleased that the Liberal Democrat administration is listening to local people, will initiate a survey, and it's vital that decisions are based on proper evidence. Follow the recommendations. Mead Lane is safe, it's been tested, it's been proved." I'd like to close with a thought for you. I own a rather nice beach hut in Lyme Regis. I don't own the right to the sand in front of it, and I don't own the sea. And I can't stop families from picnicking in front of it. But I do know it will be dangerous and wrong for me to, for those people to be told to have their picnics and play in the car park just because my view was being impaired. No more reports, no more surveys, no more wasted money. Einstein defines this situation perfectly. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over and expecting different results. You can produce more reports and more surveys, but the results will be the same. Now, councillors, I address you now. I address you on my screen. You have an elected responsibility to base your decisions on the report you have paid to be professionally compiled, comprehensively detailed, and exhaustive in content. Act on fact. Thank you very much. Any questions, I'm happy to answer, but I'm not an expert on otters.
Thank you, Ross. I'm fairly sure nobody will ask you questions on otters. Are there any other non-otter related questions for Ross? Okay, thank you. And we will take your statements into account, and please watch the rest of the meeting on YouTube. Next, I will call Laura Darling. Good evening, Laura. Would you like to unmute? Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi. 10 months ago, I shared my experience and fears over the loss of these moorings and the impact it would have on my family's way of life. I heard Cabinet members express a concern regarding the structure of the riverbank, and I was shocked and also concerned to hear this, as I'm a keen environmentalist. I take part in many boater-led environmental initiatives. I'm a member of the River Avon Users Group. I supported a tidy up at Whalley Weir following issues with members of the public littering, and I also run a forest school for the boat kids. I was relieved to read that Atkins concluded that no detrimental environmental or structural impact was a result of boats mooring at Mead Lane. However, I'm now concerned that despite no evidence of damage to the stability of the bank or the environment, Cabinet is still being asked to consider to move these moorings. I'm growing increasingly tired of having to share my story. I've attended countless meetings, consultations and surveys over the years. I've heard many empty promises, seen many compassionate nods when I explain the importance of Mead Lane to boat families. I've patiently waited for the Atkins report. It finds no reason or evidence to relocate the moorings. So I cannot understand why I'm here again with the same story, the same issues and the same instability. To repeat my points from the last Cabinet meeting, why is the 20-mile cruising distance important? Well, if my family doesn't meet these guidelines, we are placed under enforcement, putting us at risk of losing our home. That is a real threat. Many families have struggled under the pressure and some have faced legal action for not keeping up with this challenge of range. Why is Mead Lane important to us? It's the only 40-day mooring on the river for continuous cruises. It's the only mooring west of Bath, which enables my family to remain within a reasonable commute to school without breaching my licence terms. It was also where my son was born. It's a wonderful place to see otters and waterfowl swim and play around our boats. After falling pregnant, I was evicted from Saltford Marina, who do not permit children. Moorings are very rare, waiting lists are very long, hence why I continuously cruise. Removing Mead Lane moorings or even relocating them would be detrimental to my child's access to education and family life. It would mean that I would instead be forced to travel between Bath and the other side of Devizes. Beyond Devizes and its 26 locks are rural villages with limited facilities, no public transport and a very long commute to school for my son. Mead Lane is a key site for families and it's the only one which has safe access on the river, public transport, doctors and shops nearby, and there are simply no other spots on the river with access to the same. As Councillor Duncan said, it was a small stretch of the river for river users, but it's a very important one for us. As a mother, the idea of relocating these moorings fills me with dread. Keeping my boat warm, filled with water and fuel, with the logistics of a new school or work journey every fortnight is not easy. Managing a child with this and shopping and laundry down a muddy, wet towpath is not for the faint-hearted. This is in no way a sympathy vote. I am a proud and resilient mother to a fantastic child who has the most incredible childhood, surrounded by nature and a community who are among the most supportive I've known, and this is the only way of life my son has ever known. You've heard the evidence from the Atkins report. You have again heard my story. I'm appealing to the fellow parents in the room to please do the right thing this evening.
Thank you very much, Laura. I ask Cabinet, do you have any questions?
Can I ask a question, please, Madam Chair?
Yes, of course, Councillor Guy.
Laura, can I ask a question? What school does your son go to? Just for.
He goes to Fitzmaurice in Bradford-on-Avon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Okay. Well, thank you for your statement, Laura. And as you know, that will be taken into account when we discuss this item. So please, if you would like to leave and then watch the rest of this meeting on YouTube.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Dom Newton if he would like to unmute himself and possibly put his video on. Hello, Dom.
Hi there. I'm also going to read a prepared statement. Cabinet, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am, as of last Saturday, a Baines resident. I'm also elected councillor and leader of Bradford and Avon Town Council. As a town councillor, I've worked extensively over the last 3 years with the boater community and can speak with some authority on the challenges that they face, but also on the challenges that can come about due to a perception of conflict between the settled communities on the river and canal banks and the liveaboard community that is asked to cruise continuously over its existence. I feel for members tonight as they seek to balance what can, at a glance, appear to be differing interests and a situation which is clearly causing stress to both sides. A great deal of this conflict is born of preconception and honestly the need for the two communities to get to know each other a bit more, overcoming some of those barriers and understanding differing viewpoints. As a role in that in Bradford-on-Avon, and have seen positive outcomes that balance the needs of all canal users, boaters, cyclists, walkers, paddleboarders and others, while respecting and enhancing the natural environment. Bradford-on-Avon is the centre of a hub which starts at Saltford and ends at Devizes. And many of the boaters that moor at Mead Lane spend a significant proportion of their time in Bradford-on-Avon and the community area that surrounds it. I'm proud to say that they're part of our community, our schools, our arts, our culture and our businesses. You've heard and will hear from others on the impacts on their access to education, to healthcare, and even to be able to get to work. These are real impacts that will affect the lives of families who live on the canal, and the removal of the Mead Lane moorings would make what is already a tough existence even harder. Councillors, given what is in my experience a hugely positive addition to the community I serve, I have to ask on what lawful and legitimate basis it's proposed tonight to deny the mooring rights at Mead Lane. We know now that there is no scientific basis for the removal of the moorings. There's no impact on the stability of the riverbank according to the Atkins report. In terms of impact on biodiversity or ecology, the river through Bradford and the Kennet and Avon Canal passes through Bradford and Avon Triple SI site. As a regular user of the towpath and walker through the habitats alongside the canal, which is usually busy with moorings, there appears to be little or no impact from those moorings. Indeed, the reeds on the edge of the canal provide a diverse habitat. Bradford and Avon is famous for its swans, its kingfishers, and recently welcomed otters to the area. Boaters are, in my experience, among the most respectful of the natural environment, evidenced by their work clearing rubbish left by others, for example, as you've already heard at Whalley Weir. I would therefore ask that the Cabinet acts on the science in front of it, which tells us that there is no reasonable basis on which to relocate these moorings, and on the basis of building relationships between the settled and livable communities, which I have seen to benefit both socially, culturally, and economically. Instead, please look to improve mooring facilities and to serve the needs of all parts of your community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dom. Do I have any questions for Dom? No. Thank you. Thank you very much for your statement, Dom. And as you heard me say to others, that will be taken into account when we discuss this item. And please, watch the rest of the meeting on YouTube. Thank you. Next, I would like to ask Peter Denmead.
Hello,
Peter.
Good evening. The initial findings of the riverbank survey found no immediate danger for the future, but it states it was never designed for boat moorings and needs further investigation. It was only a visual inspection. The Cabinet papers have produced some interesting data which perhaps need putting into context. For example, some 40% of boats between Bath and Foxhanger devices have continuous cruising licenses. The CRT national average is only 16%. The difference may be explained by some being second homeowners, Airbnbs, household owners who rent their houses out and live a subsidised existence. But the idea of no mooring fees is always very attractive. And any survey of liveaboard boaters without taking these sort of statistics into consideration distorts the whole picture. Item 3.2, the distances between Bath and Foxhanger is about 20 linear canal miles, of which 15 is not in bays. And coincidentally, 20 miles is the total CRT range cruising license for boats to move yearly. They do give dispensation, the CRT, to any young families or people in difficulties, so they haven't got to complete this 20-mile continuous movement. This area, the 20 miles, does give a local access to boats, and really you only need to move out of this area if it's your choice. The high number of boats, 985 in this stretch alone, produces nearly £1 million of licence money for the CRT. Baines has no such funds to provide moorings at all. Item 3.9, charging for network entry implies a charge on entry for Bristol. In fact, it's just added to the berthing charge. A quotation for Bristol Harbour this morning, a 40-foot visiting boat, £12 total payable a day. Bristol's only 7 miles from Hanham. There's waiting pontoons, it's good value, with plenty of availability. As well as Bristol, Baines has 2.5 miles of alongside berths, 6 marinas, one of which it owns. It owns an existing functioning facility which can be modified or enlarged in the middle of Bath, 6,000 metres of riverbank.
3 minutes.
and access to 87 miles of Kennet Canal, most of it with free mooring. It's a huge capacity, but people say there's nowhere to go. The relocation of a small number of moorings in Mead Lane should not present any difficulties, and I'm sure the 200,000 Baines taxpayers will only welcome the availability of the natural riverbank for recreation, wildlife, and for future generations to enjoy. Duncan and Alistair are some of the best ward councillors we've ever had, and we don't want to lose them. The amount of time and effort given to this problem and the risk of placing them at odds with the local community is completely unnecessary. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Peter. Do I have any questions to ask of Peter? Thank you. So, as I have said to all the other speakers, please, we will take your statement into account, and then please will you watch the rest of the meeting on YouTube. Right, I think we have Jassie Powles.
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear and we can see you, Jassie.
Okay, I'd just like to firstly say thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. And just before I start my speech, I just ask that you could fact check some of the things that Peter said about continuous cruising guidelines on the Canal and Rivers Trust website, because they're absolutely not true. There is especially no dispensation for school families. I know that personally because it's something I've been fighting for the last 10 years. So I'd just like you to double check those facts. And now I'll start. Thank you. I have lived on a boat for 13 years and have raised 2 children, aged 6 and 11, aboard. During my time on the waterways, I've seen a significant decline in moorings. Since 2007, there have been 15 mooring sites removed, when there are more boats and we desperately need more provision. We are used to driving our rubbish and waste tanks to waterside facilities. The challenge of lack of facilities at Mead Lane is not justified. In fact, there is a toilet disposal point just below the Jolly Sailor pub, so Mead Lane is in fact one of the more convenient moorings for boaters. Travelling between towns and districts makes access to healthcare, employment and education challenging to a lot of boaters. As a marginalised group, there is little research regarding boaters, making us a somewhat hidden or less visible community. Professor Margaret Greenfield's 2013 study, which was the first in the UK and in fact commissioned by Baines Council, shows health outcomes for boaters to be much poorer than those of people who live in houses. There are many factors as to why, but her study clearly cites stability of housing underpins health and wellbeing outcomes. Today's cabinet vote is therefore crucial in terms of creating or depriving a community of housing stability. Over the years, I've been subjected to discrimination by the Cecils community. I've been called dirty and unsightly, accused of leaving litter behind. These assumptions are not based on any fact, but are prejudice. Article 8 of the Human Rights Act, respect for your private and family life, includes the right to respect for your home. It states, it is a right to enjoy your existing home peacefully. We, as boaters, are entitled to that right. Inequalities have always existed for boaters, but are now more challenging due to COVID-19. As a local authority, you committed not to move people from Mead Lane during the pandemic. This demonstrates that you are able to take decisions or create regulations if the risk or impact, in this case a global pandemic, is understood and visible. Reflecting on the equality impact assessment, it is clear that the not applicable rating given highlights that the impact on boaters is not fully understood. To illustrate this point, I ask, how many cabinet members had to make additional plans in order to practically participate in tonight's online meeting? Did you have to consider whether there was enough solar power in your batteries to power your laptop, or if your internet signal was consistent enough to last the meeting? If these points weren't an immediate consideration like there are for us, then I would suggest that insight into the day-to-day challenges or impacts of our way of life are not widely understood and visible. Therefore, how is it reasonable to make an informed decision which has huge consequences for so many of us? Inequalities for boaters will not disappear overnight. You have heard the issues and have the power to use your vote to protect the hundreds of boaters in your constituency. We have seen how a local authority can respond when it fully appreciates the impact of a visible issue. Tonight, I therefore respectfully ask Cabinet to vote no to points 1, 2 and 3. Thank you.
Thank you, Jassy. Any questions from Cabinet?
Can I ask a question, Madam Chair?
Yes, of course, Councillor Guy.
Yeah, would you be willing to meet with me at some point to discuss the issue of school families dispensation? Because it's something I'd like to learn more about and exactly why it doesn't exist.
I absolutely would. I'd love to work with councillors in all of the districts that we cover to try and work through that problem, because it is a real problem for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And like with all the other statements, we will take what you have said into account in our discussions. So please feel free to watch the rest of this on YouTube.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I would like to ask Councillor Crossley if he would like to introduce the report and to move the recommendations. Councillor Crossley.
Right, thank you very much. So that was a very interesting set of presentations from both sides of the argument. And it really comes down, it shows the complex issues that are involved and the difficulties of any decision that we have to make. I think the comments that I had not spoken to a voter is fair. And what I would like to commit to here is I'm prepared to, in the same way that I will meet with residents, I'm also prepared to meet with the voters if they wish to arrange a meeting for me to come and meet them. Because this whatever decision we make at the end of this meeting is not the end of the process. It's really the start of the next stage. So when we look at this, following the elections in May, we agreed to review the moorings at this location. And following the decision at our 16th of January meeting, we moved that step on. We then got COVID, and during COVID, we very rapidly made the decision that we would not be doing any enforcement at all during COVID. And we recognised the additional difficulties that COVID was giving to everyone. So we have engaged in consultation. We've employed Atkins, who are a very well-reputed company, to undertake a civil engineering structural survey. And from that, you can read and take the bits you want. But we are very impressed with the work that Atkins did to us, and we are very pleased with the outcomes of that work. I think it was good value for money. It certainly wasn't a waste of money. And we have also agreed a budget, and that was something that was not in previous budget proposals. So we have money available. And there are many strong feelings about this stretch of the riverbank. And as some of the speakers said, that there are miles of waterway, and there's different needs and different requirements. There are different marinas and different rules and regulations. And we are looking at basically just the Mead Lane area. Mead Lane has got a number of issues around it. It's very close to a narrow road. It's very close to the residents who live on that narrow road. And it is as part of the access to a major engineering work run by Wessex Water. And so there are a number of very important considerations to be considered in all of that. The January paper highlighted several things. It wanted an update assessment of the riverbank. That's now complete. It wanted to look at enforcement and overstays as proposed as part of the referendum. We are now going to work with the Canal and River Trust to have a warden. And it would seem to me that if when we've made the decision tonight, we should be able to get that warden put in place. We've had temporary traffic regulations put along Mead Lane to facilitate the various needs. We've done pollution and ecological assessments looking at this. And so there's been an amount of work that has been done. This is not wasted money. It is work that needed to be done because the previous times when we just allocated the moorings as a council, that work wasn't done properly and we didn't look at all the issues. So There's also a need for open space, and there is a need for moorings. And contrary to reports in the press, whilst it is recommended to remove the seasonal 14-day moorings, that's over winter, and the 48-hour moorings, which are mainly used by the leisure industry predominantly, but also some of the some of the boating community, it's noted that the 14-day moorings will remain and be available from 1st of March, and they will remain until suitable alternatives are found. So I think that's an important point to make. We are not actually at this stage removing moorings. What we're doing is recommending looking for alternative locations for those moorings, because we think that the needs of a variety of users on the Mead Lane part of this river need to be met. And one of the early speakers talked about the number of different types of use that can be made: paddle boating, angling, sailing, and all that. So there's a lot of different users on the riverbank. And what is also undoubtedly the case is that since that section has become less busy, wildlife has returned in quite big numbers. So, you know, there are a number of issues. There's the otter haul out. How do we recognise that? How do we protect that in future? And I think we can confirm that should Cabinet approve these recommendations, that I've asked that no action be taken to move boats on from the moorings during the remainder of October. So there'll be no rapid decisions being made from here. One of the boat owners said recommendations about bank stability. Well, yes, we now know that there's no immediate concerns or signs that moorings adversely affect the stability of the bank. So we know that the bank is safe, but the question is that the place we want moorings? So the medium-term recommendations of increased enforcement are addressed as part of our recommendations, and officers will discuss with the CRT the best way to restrict vessel draught and considered signage. And I think there's been several interesting points about the attitude of CRT and families. And I think it was Rebecca said she's happy to take me on a river trip. I'm not only more than happy to meet with the boaters at any time, but I'm also quite happy to come and see that stretch of the river from the weir just up from Mead Lane back towards Newbridge, and for them boaters to show me the issues that they face on that stretch. The consultation, I'd highlight to my colleagues, our duty is to conscientiously consider the outcome of any consultation. Safety, excuse me. The comprehensive active report produced by a highly credible engineering consultancy has provided us with information that there are no immediate actions required. Equality says we have to look at the boating community does not fall within the protected characteristics, but as we've heard tonight, there are a number of issues that are unique to the boating community, and then we have to develop and work and learn these and make sure that those are met. This report seeks to reduce, excuse me, this report seeks to reduce the impact upon the community by retaining the 14-day moorings on a seasonal basis until, as and when suitable alternatives can be found. In addition, the needs survey currently undertaken by the organisation in consultation with the boating community will provide us with further detail on mooring commitments. And we have recently asked the Water Space Partnership to consider the outcomes as part of their future work. The Atkin report provides some helpful suggestions on improving accessibility along Mead Lane for all users. And again, this is something I will ask the partnership to consider as they develop their work. So we then come to the recommendations. And I do have a couple of changes, one small change and one new recommendation. So if we look through the recommendations now, the Cabinet is asked to agree to reduce the number of moorings in the short to medium term by implementing paragraph 2.2 and 2.3, and thereby increasing the amount of open space along Mead Lane. And open space is also important. You know, you need open space to do many of the other activities that we talked about. And if you're an angler, you find that angling is being restricted everywhere as they find it more and more difficult to find places where they can angle. So, you know, you can look at all these conflicts in a variety of ways. There's a lot of need, a lot of different uses. Next point, agree to long-term aspiration to relocate moorings from Mead Lane. I'd like to add to that, if I can, put a target date on it. So agree to long-term aspiration to relocate moorings from Mead Lane with a target date of no later than 31st of the 12th, 2022. So that gives us, I know that some people will say that that's prolonging the agony, but as we can see from the argument and the debate and the discussion that's happened so far, this is not a thing that can be done quickly. And when you move too quickly and do things without due consultation and consideration, then mistakes are made. So as we look at this long-term aspiration to relocate, I think we need to recognise that that will take time, but I would like us to put a target date on it. So as I've amended that sentence to you. Ensure, the next point is ensure that suitable alternative moorings are identified and in place prior to reducing further any moorings at Mead Lane, and to increase enforcement and engagement capacity. So specifically 2.1, we work with the Water Space Partnership, so that is as printed, and it's working with them on 14-day moorings along the watercourse, and to request that it gives due consideration to the opinion research survey. As the first move, we want to remove the 48-hour moorings at Mead Lane from 1/11/20 on a permanent basis. This part of the riverbank to be relocated as open space for other leisure purposes. So I don't think we've had much controversy about the 48-hour moorings, so I hope that that is clearly not going to be challenged. 2.3, agree to no 14-day moorings at Mead Lane on a seasonal basis during the time period 1 November until the end of February. So I think this is a good move. It allows a breathing space, and actually it's saying that actually over the winter months when the river is moving more fast, we actually don't want any moorings there at all. 2.4, when the Water Space Partnership Programme of Work and Opinion Research Service is completed, review the moorings on Mead Lane with the aim that the total number of 14-day moorings available along the watercourse is not reduced. So the review is not about reducing the 14-day moorings, it's about relocating them to other more places where they work more suitably for everyone. 2.5, create a joint river warden post with the Canal and River Trust. Now, I think this is really important. In the past, we've not had this position and we've not had the money and finance, and working in partnership with the Canal and River Trust, I think is good for the council, it's good for the Canal and River Trust, it's good for residents, and it's good for the boating community. And it will mean that we will be learning more, because some of our speakers said that we were not aware of some of the issues. So we need to work in partnership with everyone. 2.6, delegate future decisions on Mead Lane moorings to the Cabinet Member for Community Services in consultation with Director of Environment. And that's so that we can actually start implementing some of these things as we decide them. 2.7, request that the Cabinet Member for Transport and Director of Environment in consultation with Avon and Somerset review the parking restrictions along Mead Lane and Saltford. And then the new one is a new 2.8. So I'll read this slowly because it's not printed out, but it's referred to in the report in section 3s about the charging. Request that officers devise a charging regime for moorings at Mead Lane to be implemented from 1st March 2021 in accordance with delegations outlined in recommendation 2.6. Requests for future capital allocation for moorings to be considered as part of the council annual budget setting process. And what that means is that if we're starting to get income from the moorings, then that gives us the possibility to invest and improve the whole river course. But also, if we are going to have new moorings, then there needs to be a capital allocation so that those can be provided. So I think that sums up everything. Cabinet, this is a complex issue, and there's been a number of reports, a number of papers, and an amount of lobbying from all sides. I think this is a set of conclusions that will work eventually for everyone. It's not rushing the situation, and it's getting rid of the 48-hour moorings and looking over a period which is time limited, or with a targeted time limiting, to reallocate 14-day moorings, and it's putting into the budget the money so that we can invest in partnership with the Canal and River Trust, but also as we allocate and determine where these replacement moorings are, that we've got the funding to provide the capital to make them work. So I so move the recommendations as printed, with the slight amendment to the second bullet point in the opening paragraph of the recommendations, and a new 2.8 as given tonight.
Thank you very much, Councillor Crosley. I would like to be better informed about the lives and needs of the boating community. So I'd also like to attend a meeting with boaters, if I may. But it seems to me, from what has been said in the statements made tonight, that there is a need for longer term moorings. And I have assumed that these are within the aspiration to relocate and to identify suitable moorings. And having assumed that, I will support and second these recommendations. I have a number of Cabinet members who wish to speak, so I'll bring them in turn. Councillor Ball.
Yes, thank you very much. I am going to support the recommendations this evening, although what you may hear me say now may give you something different to think about. This council and all administrations have failed the boat travelling community for many years. We attempted in the last Liberal Democrat administration to do something about it. Our report was commissioned through a scrutiny panel, which is very comprehensive at the end of the last administration. The Conservative administration took over, looked at the report and just placed boat users at Mead Lane. This is not an adequate solution at all. It gave issues of where we need to start actually looking at, seriously at the travelling boat people. Travellers who are not boat people have legal rights to sites, and have legal conditions placed on all councils and associations. So government has also failed them. The Canal River Trust have failed them as well. We don't just need to replace gates, replace moorings. We actually need to actively look for extensive moorings throughout the river and canals. There's not enough to actually meet the amount of users. Let's not just kid ourselves that we're doing a job that actually resolved the matter. Placing boat people near the radial gate in Twerton, which has been failing for many years, is irresponsible and should never have actually happened at all. And I'm not even convinced yet enough work to be done on that gate to make that safe in the long term. So the message from myself is really, we need to actually look very clearly to develop our local plan, which would be adopted in late 2022, to ensure we have identified enough areas in that local plan where travelling boat people can actually have moorings. It doesn't mean they'll be built. We'll have to look at finance through capital finance programmes and government money also to come in that sort of area. But we need a radical change of thinking from government as well to actually ensure this can happen.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. Councillor Warren?
So I can see that this has become a very divisive and intractable issue in Saltford. So I do know and have met more boaters in my own ward in Barthampton. So I am beginning to understand the difficulties that continuous cruisers have accessing continuity of education and hospital treatment, given the requirement that there is for them to move over a distance of 20 miles. I'm well aware of the valuable contribution of members of the boater community locally to me and to our wider society. I would very much support Dom Newton's comments from earlier that there's a need for the boater and settled communities to get to know one another better and to understand one another's issues and concerns. And on that basis, if this meeting is set up with members of the boating community, I'd be happy to join it. I supported the temporary removal of the moorings over the summer that we agreed to in January because of the suggestions about the instability of the bank. And now I am prepared to support the recommendations in this evening's report because I have been assured by Councillor Crossley that the overall number of 14-day moorings will not be reduced and that moorings will not be relocated until alternatives in the region between Newbridge and Keynsham have been found. But I would go further and stress to Councillor Crossley the need to continue to work with the CRT to improve provision for boaters on the waterways in Baines, and also for Councillor Guy and Councillor Crossley to investigate what scope there is to improve provision that allows families to stay close to schools in order to ensure continuity of education. And maybe we should go back to that report from 2016 that Councillor Ball referred to and see whether it's still current and whether there are actions in there that we should be implementing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Councillor Samuel.
I just wanted to make sure that the recommendation that was circulated to us for 2.8 before the meeting was actually slightly longer than I think I heard Councillor Crossley read out, because the final bit reads, requests for future capital allocation for moorings be considered as part of the Council's annual budget setting process. But that does mean those allocations will have to go through the capital strategy group and be agreed in advance. So there is if this is to be included in the 21-2 budget, it will have to be dealt with well in advance of the budget setting in February. So I just wanted to register that point, lest anybody should think that we will be able to do that as part of the budget setting. So, you know, this is not me trying to be difficult about this, but I think it is important to recognise, as you'll hear later, that the pressures on the Council's revenue and capital budget are intense and are not very keen to allow things through unless they've been through a proper appraisal process, which I'm sure is intended. So I just wanted to register that point, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Samuel. I'm sure you will get the assurance you need when Councillor Crossley sums up. Councillor Wood.
Yeah, I'm going to support the same recommendations for the same reason that Councillor Warren outlined. And I feel Councillor Ball was correct in saying that this community has been let down. We, as an area, I think would like to be known as welcoming to people with alternative lifestyles and not just tolerating those, but celebrating them as well. And if there's something that we can do through our local plan and through government funding to try to facilitate the boat community better, I think it's about time they stop being let down.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Wood. Do I have any other speakers from Cabinet? In which case, then I would like to ask Councillor Crossley to sum up for us, please.
So thank you very much. In reference to Tim's point, he's quite right. At the end of 2 administrations ago, there was a large piece of scrutiny work done to develop policy. I think, if I recall rightly, it was led by Councillor Eleanor Jackson, and then the incoming following administration from that just simply ignored it and moved very rapidly just to putting something in that was brand new to Mead Lane and Saltford, and that's really where the problem started and the one that we've picked up. And so in picking up that problem that Tim Ball had notified us of, we've had a very difficult situation which would have been solved by doing the job properly by the previous administration. Can I just assure Sarah, it says we are not reducing the number of moorings. We are just looking to move them around. And I think it's very pleasing to hear what Tim said in his review of the local plan. We must identify more areas for mooring in the local plan. So it could well be that when we come out at the end of this whole process, that actually there could be an increase in moorings, which I think will be good for everyone. In terms of Richard, can I assure you, I fully understand that everything that we put in has to go through the capital process. But I think this, if we are making changes to a situation that exists, then I will be putting a strong argument forward that this is something that needs to be considered very seriously in the capital budget allocation. And that will tie in also with Tim Ball's point with the local plan, and perhaps looking at how we get more moorings, even if we don't implement them all straight away. And Dave, is quite right. We are welcome of lifestyles. I can just, a lot of the cabinet were not here the last time that Tim Ball and me did the Gypsy and Traveller consultation over 4 years of our council, which ended up with the new site at Twerton. And Tim and me attended endless meetings, well, not endless is the wrong word, numerous meetings around the authority area, where as we look to find a solution to that problem. And these problems are not easy. And I think Sarah's point is well made, that we need to find a way to develop better relationships between the settled and the travelling communities. So I think that answers the points that have been raised in debate. And so I so move with those two amendments, one to the section, second bullet point, and the other one was the new recommendation 2.8. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crossley. I now will call each councillor in turn to ask you if you will be voting for the for what is proposed. So if you'll be voting for the paper, and I will endeavour to call you out in alphabetical order. So, Councillor Appleyard.
For as amended.
Thank you. Councillor Butters.
For.
Councillor Ball.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Crossley.
For.
Councillor Guy.
For.
Councillor Romero. For. Councillor Wood.
For.
Councillor Samuel. Councillor Samuel. Richard.
Apologies. For.
Councillor Warren.
For.
My apologies. I think my ability to do the alphabet is slightly skewed. Have I don't believe I've missed anybody out. If you haven't voted, could you indicate, please?
Councillor Wright.
Apart from Councillor Wright, who I was just coming to.
For.
Thank you. So just to confirm then, do we have anybody who is voting against the proposal?
Madam Chairman, it's unanimous for.
Okay. Thank you. Right, I would now like to suggest that we have a short break before we move on to the next item. So if I suggest 5 minutes and then we reconvene at 8:18. And whilst we're on that break, could you please turn your video and your microphones off, please? Thank you. Hello, welcome back. I'm just going to just double check that we are all present. But it looks like everybody's here. Thank you. Okay, so I'd like to ask Councillor Crosley if you would like to introduce the next item, which is the leisure service review.
Thank you very much, Leader. Right, so you know that we have a variety of different leisures. We've had coming up soon will be our consideration of Entry Hill and Approach course. Coming up after that, I hope sometime in the new year, will be a consideration of the playing fields at Lansdowne. But this is a more general approach to some of our leisure strategy. And it has several points in it. I think, first of all, I think we have to look at the impact of COVID on our leisure services, which have been delivered by GLL. The measures undertaken by both the council and suppliers to support these services. We've not really had for leisure in the terms that the way we provide it, which is through a third-party vendor, has not really been addressed by government during this COVID crisis. So it has put some quite tremendous stresses on both us and GLL. The work with partners to lobby for government support for this sector is continuing, and I think our leader, Dina Romero, has weekly meetings with the government minister concerned for local government, and I'm sure this issue gets raised fairly regularly. So we're looking at the proposed next steps to ensure that we have a sustainable leisure service for the future, because it's not a statutory duty, but leisure is absolutely really important to people, to families, to community, and to the way we live our lives. It's part of our health and fitness regime. It's part of our mental health regime, enjoying things. You know, everyone enjoys different sports, and that's one of the glories of humanity. What's one sport that someone loves, another person will hate. So we have to make sure we have a diverse and varied facility. So what we've got in here is the challenge for the leisure sector. And as a social enterprise, our provider cannot access the full range of government support, which is what I've already said. And in order to ensure we retain our local leisure provision, we have to provide supplier relief, whilst at the same time ensuring constructive challenges to GLL on their revised business and operating models. GLL has successfully reopened on a COVID compliant basis several of our local facilities and is reducing costs where possible. And the proposals before the Cabinet today support our revised business plans with GLL. And I'd like to thank both GLL and the Lighthouse School Partnership for working so productively with us during this pandemic. It's not been easy for anyone, and I think that's the first thing to note. So if we then look at what we're being asked to recommend, we've been asked to vote on. One is remove True Valley Leisure Centre from GLL contract and hand the lease to the True Valley School and the Lighthouse School Partnership. Whilst I have to acknowledge that there has been some confusion over dates and printing of reports, which hasn't met with everyone's timescales, and I apologise unreservedly for any confusion that might have arisen during those production of reports. There was no ill intent meant. We are working very well with our partners in the Lighthouse School Partnership, and we're looking very pleased to be working with them as they take the True Valley Leisure Centre from us, and hopefully do with the True Valley Leisure Centre what has happened at similar measure with Ridlington School and the leisure facilities in that part of our authority area. We want to reopen the Dryside facilities at Colberhay Leisure Centre, and that I can pleased to tell Cabinet will be starting on October the 19th. So this is the last of the major facilities operated by GLL around our authority area, and that will be opening on October 19th. The future of the swimming pool has to be considered in more detail, as there are a number of issues around the pool and the equipment that's required to make the pool, and particularly in sense of COVID-19 infection risk. And also, as a Cabinet and as a community, we are looking at the whole future for this site. So anything to do with the swimming pool will need to be considered as part of that revamp of the whole Culver Hay site. But I'm delighted that in the interim, we are at least reopening the dry sports facilities on that side of the town for the community of Southwest Bath. And finally, I'm asking in this report that we investigate opportunities to improve the Odd Down sports ground to turn this facility from a deficit to a profit. So a business case that demonstrates a clear return on investment well within the remaining life of the contract will be required for this to proceed. And to that, I can say that we are already looking at a number of possible ways that this can be done. So we are talking with a sports club that want to relocate and join us at the Odd Down Sports Hub. And that would provide us with the opportunity for, subject to planning, of course, with an opportunity for a new facility, which would not only be for sport, but would have a clubhouse, which would then have an improved bar and cafe and restaurant provision. And this would enable us then to put more sporting facilities into the current build block there, and also look to add facilities that generate a lot of income, like a top-class gym. And to that end, we're talking to some gym operators about how they can work in partnership. So as with other papers that I present, what we're doing with this type of area that's not statutory is we're really building on all the partnership work that we do with a variety of partners and operators to ensure that we provide both top-class facilities offering a range of sports. And I would just remind you that the cycle provision that we have there is totally excellent and is widely used. So what we want to do is to make sure that we have a number of other opportunities there for sports of a variety of measures and types that meet the needs of men and women, boys and girls, the disabled, and everything in between and around every category. So we want more sports played by more people in more ways at more locations more often. So what we're doing with this paper is we're improving the Chew Valley Leisure Centre by working in partnership with Lighthouse School Partnership. We're improving, or we're starting to reopen Culver Hay, and in the first instance that's dry sports, and we're looking to greatly improve the facilities at the Odd Down Sports Ground. So I so move this paper.
Thank you very much, Councillor Crossley. Do I have someone to second, please?
Yes, Chairman. Well, I'm pleased to second this report. What Councillor Crossley has highlighted is the dynamic financial position that the leisure industry sadly finds itself in, and that in part has been caused by the COVID crisis, which has closed many of the centres and reduced income for operators. But I just want to take the opportunity in supporting this recommendation to highlight the failure of the Conservative government to provide any money at all to leisure services such as the ones that we operate under contract, GLL. And apparently, according to The Guardian, the Treasury is sitting on £500 million of money destined for the leisure industry to support it in this time of need. And it's inexplicable to me why that should be the case. If the money has been allocated by the Chancellor, why are officials in the Treasury and others and other ministers sitting on that money when it is actually needed? The report highlights that money that the Council has had to provide from the grant that it received from the government 565,000, but you'll see that only takes losses to the end of August. And I am fearful that if there is further disruption to GLL's business within our area, there will be a demand for further money. And as members will know, that's going to be extremely difficult. So I think it is worth noting and recording that the government does have an obligation here. And for some reason, it has failed to come up with support for this industry, which has thousands of jobs across the country within it, aside from the other benefits that leisure services bring. So, Chair, with that, those remarks, I second this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Samuel. And as Councillor Crossley pointed out in his opening remarks, it is quite true. And in conversations that I have with other leaders across the country as well, leisure providers are simply not, the losses that they have had to endure are simply not being met, and this government does not seem to understand the huge benefit that this industry brings to a variety of users. And I can't fully explain why it is that they fail, or so far have failed, to recognise the value. I'd like to ask Councillor Ball for his comments.
Yes, thank you. Hearing Councillor Samuel just now stating the amount of money government has just sat on when this industry could be actually moving forward now is quite astonishing. It proves the incompetence of the government itself for not listening to communities, not listening to local councils, and actually acting where we actually need money to go in to improve our leisure services. We've all been hit hard by COVID-19, and every section of the community has. It doesn't seem to be recognising the issues this council actually has at all. It's about time they woke up and listened to people.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. Do I have any other speakers on this paper? So, Councillor Crossley, it's back to you to sum up, please.
Nothing really to sum up, other than the fact that I'm delighted that Dina, as our leader, you're not only talking to government, but you're talking to leaders across the country. And I would just reiterate that point as someone who talks to other cabinet members responsible for delivering leisure across the country. This is actually a national problem. It's not just one that we face, but I think we're in better shape than most in terms of we got our swimming pools back earlier into operation, and that was, with a constructive partnership with GLL. So, the swimming pools at both the Bath Leisure Centre and Keynsham are working well, and hopefully as they get full up and more and more demand comes up, then we may be able to consider opening Culver Hay swimming pool as well in advance of the complete revamp that we undoubtedly need in some shape or form on that site. So that's, I think, all to add. Much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Crossley. I'll now ask everyone to vote, and I will now call you in a better alphabetical order than I did before. So, Councillor Appleyard.
Well, that started the same way, for the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Ball?
For.
Councillor Butters?
For.
Councillor Crossley?
For.
Councillor Guy?
For.
Councillor Romero? For. Councillor Samuel?
For.
Councillor Warren?
For.
Councillor Wood?
For.
Councillor Wright?
For.
Thank you. So, Jack, is that unanimous?
That is unanimous, Madam Chairman.
Thank you for confirming. Okay, so the next item is item 13, and it's the 2021 to 2022 medium-term financial strategy. Richard, could you introduce the report and move the recommendations, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, as members of the Cabinet will know, the financial challenge we've had this year has been extreme in the least. And the impact from COVID on our finances has been quite unprecedented. The Council acted very quickly because it was very clear very early on in the pandemic lockdown that there was going to be a serious detrimental impact on the Council's income. And that is important in itself because the income provides one of the pillars of our funding for the services we provide. So the financial recovery plan was approved in July and requires savings of the order of around 20 million to be made in year to balance the books. And to remind Cabinet, that was in the expectation, sadly, that the government would not meet the full losses that the Council expected to encounter during this current financial year. Now I'm labouring this a bit because the context for the strategy is that the Council's income position is likely to be under pressure for many years to come. It is certainly going to underperform this year. We do not expect income to return to previous levels next year. And it's expected that there will be a long tail with this particular problem. It will go on for many financial years. So that's the background to this paper. And the paper really, although in the paper that you will see that the Council's financial position and outturn is expected to improve during this year, we still expect the budget to be in deficit at year end to some degree. And we can't be precise about that yet, but we do expect that to be the case. So that's the starting point for the medium-term financial strategy. And really what the strategy tries to do is to set out that environment for all of us as we go into planning budgets for succeeding years. It's not a budget by itself, but it just sets out the problems and the financial challenges that the Council will have to meet. And those are pretty hefty. The 5-year savings requirement estimated at the moment is 35.9 million. And that's a very tough challenge, with 29 million of that loaded to the next 2 financial years. So we have a very big problem to tackle, and we are working on that now as we move towards the preparations for next year's budget. We will have to, it is frankly impossible to simply make cuts of the order that would be needed in 1 financial year or even 2. So the strategy does highlight the need to smooth out some of these budget reductions over a number of years. And the way that will be done has not yet been finalized, but we expect to have to do that in order to create achievable savings targets in each year. Against this background is the huge uncertainty about the government's intentions. The spending review that was due is now kicked into the long grass, and we expect the spending announcements to be of a much shorter period, possibly a year at a time. And that's probably because the government itself does not know where the finances and the economy, the state of the economy are going. And so we are held at a bit of a hostage to fortune with that, because we will not know for certain in the way that we would normally know the government's intentions for funding. So that creates quite a big difficulty for us. I'm hopeful by the time we get to the budget in February that we will know much more about next year at least. But as members can see, this is a really difficult, unstable environment on which to plan our future spending. Just to turn briefly to the capital spending that the Council has, this will also not be immune from the pressures that we face. And the Council will have a lot of difficulty borrowing money, although interest rates are very low to do that. unless it can justify that in terms of the pressure that it then creates on the council's revenue budget. So we're very boxed in, as all councils are, and this plan will provide the template for discussions that will now follow over the coming months as we move towards the budget next year and starting to think about the budget for the year after. So, Madam Chairman, with that kind of introduction, I move the recommendations in the report and look forward to discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Samuel. Do I have a seconder?
I'd like to second the plan, please, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Guy. Do you wish to speak now?
Yes, please, yeah. Thankfully, this authority entered the COVID-19 crisis with a balanced and well-managed budget. However, officers and councillors have had to work extremely hard to manage the financial and social shock that COVID has caused. We have received financial help from central government, but nowhere near enough to cover the losses occurred and the biggest challenge faced in a generation. I would like to take this opportunity to thank officers and Councillor Samuels for pulling this medium-term financial plan together. It is an excellent example of sound financial management, and I'm happy to second the plan.
Thank you, Councillor Guy. I have Councillor Ball to speak.
Thank you. My colleagues have covered very well the issues of the report, and I'm happy to support the recommendation this evening. Can I point out, though, the conspicuous absence of the Leader of the Opposition in this meeting tonight? I would have thought he'd be very interested in the financial issues as council. I would take it by his absence, he's very supportive of the way Councillor Samuel is working at the moment, and will be supporting the budget next February when we bring it forward. I would have very much expected questions tonight and at least comments from the papers, but we have none. So I take it there are none to be issued.
Interesting points, Councillor Ball. Do I have any other speakers? In that case, Councillor Samuel, would you like to sum up?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, I couldn't put it more succinctly than Councillor Ball, really. I think there is a bit of a deficit in the Conservative Party in understanding what is happening in communities around the country. I was reading only today that if the proposed 3-tier system for lockdown comes in, at the moment, the promise to local authorities, if what is reported is correct, is at level 2, which is the kind of medium level of the 3, £1 per household. No, sorry, £1 per head of population in your council district will be given to councils to help deal with those lockdown things. Well, for us, it's 180,000. And if it goes to level 3, which is the most severe level, that's 360,000. These sort of sums of money are so far divorced from reality. You can see why we have a problem in this strategy, because the government's provision of money to the need is completely disconnected. And we need to say that loud and clear, because our communities need to understand why we can't do things now and why we can't do things in the future that money enables you to do. However, just returning back to the strategy, it is the basis on which we will now judge what we do in the next few years, and it does provide a very good template. And I particularly would like to record my thanks to Andy Rothery, the Director of Finance, who I've worked with very closely on this to make sure that what is a very good, a very polished document becomes a reality. So with that, I've just closed my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Samuel. I lost my list with the, there it is. Okay, so we now move to the vote, and I will take you again in alphabetical order. So Councillor Appleyard.
4.
Councillor Ball.
4.
Councillor Butters.
4.
Councillor Crossley.
4.
Councillor Guy?
4.
Councillor Romero? 4. Councillor Samuel?
4.
Councillor Warren?
4.
Councillor Wood?
4.
And Councillor Wright?
4.
Thank you. And staying with you, Councillor Samuel, would you like to introduce item 14, which is the Treasury Management Monitoring Report to the 30th of June 2020, and it's the out-term report.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, this is the usual report that Council has agreed in the past. I'm sure members are becoming more and more familiar with this as they see it with a lot of regularity. There are very few headlines in this. The Treasury Management summary really talks about how we are managing the money that we have within our budgets and how we're actually managing the investment money that we have. Interest rates are very, very low at the moment, so the returns we're receiving on interest rates set out at 3.1 are very low indeed, so they don't raise too much excitement, I'm afraid. And that the indicators that the Council has previously agreed, which are all set out in Appendix 1, the Council's performances within those indicators. So what I would like to say, Chairman, is that the work that goes on these reports is very important indeed, and the officers who produce these reports do a very professional job of pulling this information together for us on a regular basis. And it's perhaps worth reminding people why we do this before I finish. In days gone past, when councils had investments in more risky areas of investment, and in the past that was the Eurozone banks, members called for a more regular monitoring of what the council was doing, and that is what you have before you. So with that, Chairman, I'd just like to record my thanks to the officers and move the recommendations in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Samuel. And in seconding this report, I'd also like to echo your thanks to officers who I know work so hard on finance matters. So thank you. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Samuel?
Well, it's been a long meeting, and I'm sure that members don't want to hear me drone on anymore. I think I've said everything I need to, so I'll draw a line there. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And so now we will take the vote. Councillor Appleyard?
4.
Councillor Ball?
4.
Councillor Butters?
4.
Councillor Crosley?
4.
Councillor Guy?
4.
Councillor Romero? 4. Councillor Samuel?
4.
Councillor Warren?
4.
Councillor Wood?
4.
And Councillor Wright?
4.
So, Jack, is that also a unanimous vote?
That is correct, Madam Chairman. Unanimous. 4.
Thank you very much. Well, that was the last item on our agenda. So I would like to thank everybody who has watched the meeting on YouTube and also everyone who has participated in the meeting. The next meeting of Cabinet will be held on the 5th of November 2020. And on that note, I will close the meeting. So thank you, everybody, and good night.